Okay, we are live. Let's see. Hello, everyone. I think viewers are coming on. I can see. Welcome to tonight's fertility sessions, where we come to you live with women's health advice from women's health experts, and it's totally free. Tonight I have with me Donielle Baker. She authored the book Naturally Knocked Up, and I'll let her do her intro in a second. But as you guys know, if you've been following these fertility sessions, I pick some awesome co-hosts, and it's a lot of fun for me as well, because I get to just hear their advice, pick their brains. I get to learn, and then I can better serve all of my clients and vice versa. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Aimee Raupp. I'm the author of this book, Yes, You Can Get Pregnant. And this is my first book, Chill Out and Get Healthy, which this is a really, really, really old version. You can't even see it's got tape on it. But I've been practicing acupuncture and Chinese medicine for 11 years and have a bit of a focus on women's health and wellness. And since the release of Yes, You Can Get Pregnant, more of my clients are fertility clients. And it is my mission to empower women with as much information as I possibly can so that they can take back the power over their health and their fertility. I truly believe that when we feel empowered or we believe in our bodies, that it will function more optimally. So it is always my goal to educate and empower and enliven and renew hope, and so I can awaken you to your healthiest life. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Danielle and let her intro herself.
All right. Thanks, Aimee. Well, thanks for having me tonight. This is fun. I love doing video chats. Kind of makes me, get dressed up, put a little makeup on.
There you go.
I'm just sitting behind, my computer screen all day. I'm Danielle, and I run the website Natural Fertility Wellness.com. And like Aimee mentioned, I authored the book Naturally Knocked Up. And then I've done a couple of other small ebooks as well, like a sugar detox challenge, and then another small book on cleansing for conception. And basically, I fell into this area of health because of my own personal experience. It was over 10 years ago now, where we were trying for our first, and Googling online, like there was just nothing. There was not a lot of information other than the conventional medicine. Basically just, eat a little bit healthier, and if you don't get pregnant, your doctor can help you with some pills. And so finally, after a whole bunch of research myself and a few holistic practitioners in town, and finding other practitioners throughout the country that I was able to speak with, I started this website because I wanted to be able to have all of this information out there for other women who were dealing with the same thing, make it a little bit easier to find, make it available, and to also find community as well, because I found that so important in my own journey. So community for me, and having a supportive and positive community really impacted me in a great way.
And then you do a lot of work, right? Online, you have a lot of community work that you do with women, right? You do groups.
Yep. Yeah. I have a private chat group, which is, I don't know, we're at a nice, comfortable 1,800 members right now.
Wow.
Which is great because, there's so many different women from different backgrounds, and they deal with different health issues. So it's great that, if a woman deals with PCOS, she can come on and ask, hey, what has your personal experience been with this? What did you find helpful? And tons of other women can chime in, and their stories are all different. Their path to healing was so different. So it's so nice to be able to, have different points of view, and a lot of different, information available.
Oh, I love it. That's wonderful. And then how many children do you have? You went on to get pregnant naturally and easily?
Yes, I have 3 children. All of them took some time. Also had a miscarriage between our second and third. So we've kind of run the gamut of pretty much everything dealing with infertility. And yeah, so it's been a journey, that's for sure. And I think with each year and with each baby, I've learned something else about my body and something else that I can shift and change and grow into. So it's,
Love
yes,
it. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's get into it, because I feel like I jammed tonight's conversation with quite a few different and interesting topics. So I want to cover everything, and then we didn't have a ton of questions, but I'm sure some will come up on the chat. So tonight's topic is what I was calling the top 5 habits of highly fertile couples. And you know, if you've been following me or even Danielle, I'm sure you know we talk a lot about the importance of nutrition and you know, probably ad nauseum, right? So everyone, I think, knows across the board, you know, my general nutrition recommendations. They probably know Danielle. So I thought that we would not talk about nutrition tonight. You know, I'm sure it's gonna weave in because it's just such a part of our repertoire, but that we would talk more about lifestyle and the importance of lifestyle shifts or certain habits that you know, either work into your lifestyle or cultivate, you know, whatever it is, have in your lifestyle, but that these certain lifestyle habits can really help improve your health and shift your fertility. You know, one thing I always say, and I'm sure Danielle, it's the same for you, but that your fertility is an extension of your health. So my goal is to really optimize your health. And when you are supremely healthy, fertility should just happen. You know, we don't have any real direct measures other than the Western ones, which can be quite, what's the word, upsetting at times, invasive, judgmental. You know, you're only as good as your highest FSH type of thing. And so I prefer to stay away from those types of, you know, I don't even pay attention to FSH or AMH anymore in my clinic. I don't think it really matters. I'm all about improving the quality of your health and then therefore improving the quality of your eggs and your reproductive system. But so these lifestyle habits are all in a way to support that optimizing of your health. So real quick, I'll run off what I think are the top 5 habits of fertile people, and then I threw in some for couples because I think there are some habits that couples should actually do together, and then we'll let Danielle chime in and just start a little chat from there. But number 1 that I think is very often overlooked, and I talk about it a lot in my coaching, and I've addressed it in the book, but I myself, I can, you know, slip on discussing it in the clinic sometimes with my clients, but getting back into nature. So especially for me and my clients, we live in New York City. So it's a very urban environment. We can go sometimes an entire day without even being outside. You know, we just walk from our homes to the subway underground out, you know, and some days I don't even walk a full block outside, you know. I try not to make that happen, but the dead of winter, that's probably the case. But realizing that nature can also be brought inside. We can have plants, you know, we can, you know, just grow our own little herb garden or things of that nature. But to get back in touch with nature, I think it's really important, especially when the weather permits to get outside, walk. You know, in New York, I'll recommend that you get off one subway stop before, and so then you're walking an extra couple blocks and you're taking the time to really take in nature, which I think is tremendously important. Nature is, you know, what we've lost touch with, and it is a constant reminder to us of all the fertility that surrounds us. You know, nature is intensely fertile, and I think when we spend more time in that type of environment, we pick up that energy. And when we start to really appreciate nature, then we can start to generate more faith in our ability to procreate and the world around us. You have anything to add into that about the nature topic?
Well, you know, I think sometimes too, just being in nature is so calming.
It is.
You know, whether you're sitting on, like, I live near Lake Michigan. Oh. So we go to a nice big lake and, you know, you hear the waves crashing and you know, it's so calming and so peaceful. And I've grown up in the country my whole entire life, and we live in the country now. So I can go walk in the woods if I want. And so many times I choose not to.
Right.
You know, even though I don't live in a huge city, like sometimes, you know, the only time I go outside is to grab the mail or, you know, to get in my van and leave. And it's really something I have to be conscious about is to choose to go outside, to choose to just sit in the grass and read a book or watch my kids play or take a walk in the woods and just quietly listen to the things around. And it's just so calming to our bodies, that it definitely, it brings your stress level down again. Because I think so many of us live in that like chronic stress state that we just really need something to not just bring our mind, you know, down, because sometimes we can talk ourselves out of a bit of stress, but the body itself just really is a lot calmer when you're surrounded by nature.
Yeah, it's very grounding, right? You know, no pun intended. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think a good piece of advice too. I love the grass part, you know, where just taking off your shoes and letting, you know, letting your feet touch the grass or sand, you know, it just feels so good. It really is grounding, and it does connect you to, you know, this greater universe that we are a part of, and, you know, helps you, I think, in a sense, realize how minuscule we all are. And not to, you know, I don't mean that in a what's the point kind of way. I just mean it in, you know, to keep everything in perspective.
Yes, exactly.
And it's so easy to not, you know, to lose sight of that and to be very wrapped up in ourselves. So with the nature topic, I think the next habit I think is very important is to disconnect a little bit from these things and these things that we're talking into, that we sit in front of all day. Less electronics, you know, especially I would say most importantly in the bedroom. So if we could just get away from electronics in the bedroom. So no phones are being charged overnight on your nightstand. They are outside. You know, we charge ours outside in the kitchen. I'm in my bedroom right now, actually, no electronics, but this is not bedtime, so it's okay. It's the quietest place because the little guy wasn't asleep yet. And he just wants to get everywhere. So you guys will all see one day, I'll tell you. But so detaching from electronics, I mean, there's also just this sense of the energy that these put off, but this constant connection. We need to disconnect. You know, I'm working on my next book, and one of the pillars, I'm calling it, is reconnecting to self, because we have so much in our worlds that disconnect us from us, from, you know, it's probably the same with you too, Danielle, but I'll meet a new patient, and, you know, fertility patient, and I'm going to talk to her about maybe ovulation, and she's not even really in touch enough with her body to know when or if she sees the cervical mucus. Does she feel cramping? Does her sex drive increase? You know, and these are very basic things. And listen, it's not terribly bad if you don't have all those symptoms, but to not know if you experience them really gives me an idea of how connected you are to self or not. So to find ways to disconnect. So nature is a great way to find that way to disconnect. But then in addition, you know, for sure, I always say, you know, have a lights out time. Like, I don't know if anybody went to sleepaway camp, but I did. And they used to have lights out, and it would be, you know, I don't know, a couple hours before bedtime probably, but you basically had your flashlight and you could read a book, and that was about it. There was no electronics whatsoever. And I recommend the same thing 1 hour before bed. No TV, no computers, no iPads, no Kindles, no phones for sure. And, you know, we have a battery operated alarm clock in the bedroom for my husband to get up. But so disconnecting from electronics, very important. You know, the other thing too is there are some studies that show if you have too many electrical wires, especially any that run under the bed, that they can disrupt ovulation, normal ovulation in a woman. So, you know, keep that in mind when it comes to electronics. You have anything you want to add in there, sweetie?
You know, I think it's so easy to be so involved with our gadgets just because of social media and
Yes.
working in social media. I feel like sometimes I have to make a really like hard and fast line. Like I just, I recently took all of my social media stuff off of my phone and off of my iPad because it was just
Wow.
almost, I mean, I hate to say tempting, but when you're bored and you're just sitting there and it's right to you, you're like, oh, well, I'll just kind of mindlessly scroll through.
Instagram.
And yes, yes. And I got to the point a few months ago where, you know, I thought, the world is so available to us. I mean, we have everything available, and I really need to make my own world smaller.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to take on the stress of everything, especially with, you know, all the whole political scene in the US right now. And you know, just reading everything on Facebook and Instagram, and I tend to take on the stress and the feeling of, you know, everybody else's updates that I'm reading. So when I put my phone down after 15 minutes, I'm, you know, not at ease anymore. And it's not my own, you know, it's not my own stress. It's not my own things I'm dealing with. It's someone else's. So I really just had to cut everything out. And I think you just kind of, yeah, you feel more at peace, and you're just aware of your surroundings and aware of what's going on in your own home and in your own space. And I think that's so important to know.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I have this rule. I don't, you know, we watch TV more because my husband's kind of a TV guy, but it's usually, it has to be something funny. I won't watch anything violent. But also that I never watch the news ever. Like you know, the day Osama bin Laden was killed, I didn't know until like mid-afternoon. Like I met somebody for lunch and they were like, you don't even know what happened today, do you? And I was just like in a clueless bubble. But I do it because it stresses me out. I don't want to know, even the political stuff that's going on. Listen, I go into the clinic and I every single patient will tell me exactly what's happened today. So I catch up on all the news. I hear it. But personally, I agree with you. It's just, I start carrying other people's burdens, and I don't want to, you know, and that's just something I think we should all consider. I'm not saying that you have to stop watching the news just because that's what I do, but that's just what worked for me. Even I used to be a huge baseball fanatic, and I would, you know, get like kind of obsessive about these games. And I just, one day I was like, life is so much more important than baseball, you know, and that sounds judgmental. I'm not judging anyone who likes baseball, but for me, it was just this, it was a way for me to numb out. I was numbing out. I was detaching, and that's, you know, what I was doing. So it was a realization for me that I was using my gadgets or, you know, media, social media, things like that. And we all tend to. One of my dear friends, Claudia Chan, she has a rule, no social media in bed, you know, or no social media like when you first wake up in the morning. And I try to abide by that, where it's like, the phone isn't in the bedroom, but then, you know, I'm out there in the kitchen in 3.5 seconds anyway. And to not look at Instagram, to not, you know, upload a picture or, you know, do a social media post for at least that first hour, where it's just, I just try to be zen, cook breakfast, you know, enjoy my coffee, my meditation, or my tea, depends on what the mood I'm in. But yeah, it's really something to pay attention to, and especially, you know, for our society. And then I think especially, you know, we're talking to a population that you guys are having challenges with conceiving, and we don't think that any of this has anything to do with it. You know, I've even heard certain fertility doctors in New York City say, you know, diet has nothing to do with fertility, and that couldn't be further from the case. And then there are also, you know, there's plenty of research that supports that diet has a lot to do with health and fertility, but there's a lot of research also that supports, you know, our exposure to electronics, our lack of being in touch with nature. Those things really do affect our health on a cellular level. And that's what we're really trying to do here, is improve your health on the cellular level. So keep that in mind. You know, if you are pretty addicted to your gadget, then maybe do a little gadget detox. You know, try to set parameters. Or I love what Danielle did. I don't know if I could actually do that. Like, honestly, I'm a bit addicted, especially to Instagram. So I'm going to give it a shot. But okay, so another big habit that I think is important is sleep, and not just a little bit of sleep, but a healthy amount of sleep. We're talking 7 to 8 hours of consecutive hours of sleep would be the most ideal. as I have a new guy, he's 9 months old. I don't get consecutive hours of sleep anymore. We still get up probably once a night, but I still get my 8 in, and it's super important. I mean, I noticed such a difference in my health in general. Like what I call my red flag is my eczema. And since I gave birth to him, it started to flare up again. And I had it under control for decades, I would say, and I just started thinking I was breastfeeding. I wasn't sleeping enough. I went back to work full time. Like all of a sudden my system was giving me a hint that it was out of whack. And so I got real serious about the sleep, where I started going to bed earlier so I could still get full 8 hours of actual sleep, even if I'm up for, a half hour in the middle of the night. So 7-8 hours of sleep, and you really should wake up feeling rested in the morning. That's really important. And if you have a hard time falling or staying asleep, one thing I always recommend is a couple almonds or some nuts or a little bit of nut butter before bed, or even almond milk, any sort of protein really. Hummus will work, a hard-boiled egg, but it keeps your blood sugar nice and even. And that's important for fertility, but it's also really important for restful night's sleep. So if anyone has some sleep issues, that's something to think about. But if you are not sleeping enough, if you're sleeping consistently 5 hours a night, that will for sure affect your fertility 100%. And if you are one of those night owls, you don't go to bed until after midnight, another thing that definitely affects your hormones. You should really be in bed before 11. And, so then we're up at like 6 or 7. And if your wake up time is 5, then you should be in bed at 10 and, detached from your electronics at 9. But this is, how would I say? I think, it's my number 3 that I'm talking about, but I legitimately think it's the number 1 habit of highly fertile people. You need your sleep. And what do you want to add to that?
I think I totally agree with you. Sleep is one of the number 1 things to focus on. So many times with all of the changes, nutritional changes and lifestyle changes and all of these things that you feel like you have to change in order to get pregnant. I think sleep really should be the first one to consider. I've gone through the same thing, just months with, not enough sleep due to kids or insomnia. After my miscarriage, I actually dealt with about 1.5 years of insomnia. And no matter what we did, we couldn't figure it out until I went to one of the doctors in town, and we did some testing and found I was deficient in a couple of different things. And once we got that straightened out, I started sleeping again. But yeah, without that sleep, your body, that's when your body kind of fixes things. You're busy all day long, and your body needs those hours to really kind of, replenish and renew. And, your liver tends to detox at night. What is it? Between 1 and 3, the liver kind of boosts up detoxification. So if you're awake till 1 or 2 in the morning, it's a circadian rhythm thing. Like we all have it. It's the same time, no matter what shift you work, or how, if you regularly go to bed at 2 a.m., your liver still needs that time right after midnight to start really detoxifying properly. It's a natural body process that some of us aren't getting because we stay up too late. And a few years ago, I decided to start going to bed by 10 p.m. And sometimes I'm even in bed by 9:30 because, sleep is just that important to me now. And if I don't get sleep, it's harder to make a good breakfast in the morning. You wake up tired and all you want to do is a cup of coffee and something sweet to, quickly get going. And so sleep to me really helps our morning.
8:20. Sorry.
We start off, a good breakfast and really, get a great start to the day in that aspect as well. So yes, I agree with you completely. Sleep is definite number 1.
Yeah, it's so important. I agree. And yeah, we can't, we'll leave it at that because we could probably talk all night just about the importance of sleep, but especially when it just comes to hormone balance and really, that same thing, like you said, it's when the body restores. So if we're talking about, I'm sure you deal with the same thing, regardless of the age of the woman, she's concerned that she's too old to get pregnant, even if she's 30 or if she's 40, she's concerned about her age. So if you are concerned about your age and getting pregnant, the number one thing you need to be doing is sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours a night and being in bed before 11 o'clock. That is when the cells restore. And so, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's a big difference between chronological age and physiological age. So meaning how old you are numbers wise, right? I'm 41, versus how old your cells are. And I always joke or whatever, my belief is my cells are about 33 or so, and I think I'm younger now than I was 4 or 5 years ago cellularly, because I've been doing this for so long, and I believe fully that all of you can do that, and that's not just something I just decided to make up out of thin air. There's again also science to back that up. If you follow anything Deepak Chopra talks about, he's all about the fact that we can reverse the aging process on the cellular level, and he's done tons of interesting research surrounding it, so you could Google some of that. But sleep really is that important. So please, if anything you walk away from tonight is sleep, 7 to 8 hours. And can I ask, Danielle, what were some of the things that came up that you were deficient in, if you don't mind sharing? Because maybe that's some of our listeners.
Sure. Vitamin B12 was a big one.
Okay.
I think, she wanted my levels over 600, somewhere in the 800 range. I was at like 293.
Which a medical doctor would say is normal. It's within range, right? So yeah.
Because they look at anything under 200.
Yep.
Since I was over 200, they wouldn't have even, batted an eye at that. And I think the vitamin B12 was the biggest thing for insomnia. I started taking a sublingual B12, and within a week I was sleeping normally. The other thing that was low was vitamin D.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think the B12 made more of a difference. Just because I stopped taking it for a while, thought I was better, didn't need it, and the sleepless nights came back. So we still have that on hand every once in a while.
It's interesting too, because the B12 has a lot to do right with blood, and we say blood-rich foods, or foods that help build your blood. So the iron-rich foods usually have typically a high amount of B12. But in Chinese medicine, we typically see insomnia as, we say, the spirit can't find a place to rest at night. It's what we say. And the spirit's normal place to rest is in the blood. And so if there's not enough blood, which is very common after, pregnancies, but then also a miscarriage if you lost a lot of blood. And then also we say the overthinking and the perseverating, the worrying, that kind of thing actually depletes your blood. So it's interesting that the B12 was deficient. And I think you and I are totally on the same page diet wise, but that's why I'm such a big fan of liver. It's one of the most nutrient dense foods. I consider it like nature's B complex. And so you can get really nice amounts of B12 in there. But that's a great way to balance that. And then even, the sublinguals work. B12, I like, what's that? Blood Builder, Mega Foods is a good brand too. But you guys could all get tested. You could get your B12 and your D tested. I say your D should be at about a 50, and right with your B12 at about, at least 650 to 800, I think is pretty good. Okay, so moving on, another really important habit, which I guess this is a habit, but I think it should be a habit if it's not a habit, is finding ways to believe in your body, that it does function the way it should, that fertility is something that you were born with, if you will, and that when given the right environment will thrive. So what I often do in my coaching work and in the clinic all the time is really try to empower women to start to see how their body does work or how it is responding, right? So even for you, the B12 is a perfect example of like, okay, I wasn't sleeping, my body wasn't working, I couldn't fall asleep. So something was wrong, but then I researched and I figured it out. And then I took the B12 and look, boom, it started working again right away. So when we can supply it with the right either nutrition or lifestyle or things like that. And then the body shifts and starts to actually function more optimally. And so, I always throw all these dietary recommendations and supplements and lifestyle at my clients. And I know it's completely overwhelming. But one of the ways I kind of get them to buy into it and stay with it is, pay attention to how your body's shifting. Like, do you feel more energetic in the morning? Do you feel more rested? Are you having better bowel movements? Do you have better sleep? Does your skin look better? Are you getting less, whatever, PMS, there's all sorts of symptoms that we can see start to shift. And so to start to pay attention to how your body does work and how it does respond to the ways you are supporting it, I think is really important in this process. So especially, making changes from this space of, I have to eat liver every day because Aimee says it's good for my fertility, versus when I eat liver, I notice, I don't know, my nails are better, my hair's better, I sleep better, or I just feel more energetic, and maybe it's the liver. I don't really know, but I feel better. So I'm going to continue to do it. And to really start to come from that place of, how do I feel on a health basis? How is my body functioning? How is it changing and hopefully improving? And so you can start to believe in your body again. The belief in your body and its ability to function and to do what you want it to do is, it might be my number two. I think it's really profound. It's foundational. It's just the basis of it. When a woman just doesn't believe that her body can get pregnant, I always feel like I have a lot of work to do. I have to peel back the layers of that onion and really get into, because there's typically, worthiness issues and, probably issues with, I shouldn't say issues, I hate that word, but challenges with self-love, with self-forgiveness. There's a lot of that stuff that comes up. And so when you start to believe and feel more confident in your health, then it's my hope that then you feel more confident about your ability to get pregnant, or that your body actually responds and says, hey, now I'm healthy enough, I'm going to get pregnant. Look at that. Or I'm going to start ovulating, more efficiently, and you're going to see some really good healthy cervical mucus, and your sex drive's going to go up. And, and if you do get a period, that there's less clots and less cramps, and, it's nice, even flow and bright red blood, and, all of those things to really start to say, like, my body is actually doing, working the way it's supposed to. And that feels really good to me. So believing, and that's, for men as well, I think that's really important. We didn't touch upon it yet, and we'll get into it quick soon, but that all of these fertility challenges really take a toll on the couple, and they really take a toll on the man as well, because it's this sense of, I can't provide for you what I feel like I should be able to, and so it causes a lot of strife and internal strife, and just there's a sense that something isn't working, and whose fault is it, and what am I doing wrong, all of these things. And so I think it's important to find a way to support one another, encourage one another as much as you can, but cheer each other on to find ways to, to show or display that, you have belief in their body, and then they have belief in your body, and, just to support one another. But this, I feel like is a crux to most all diseases, but especially in the fertility picture, where you just really start to lose faith in your body. And that's such a sad, a sadness for me. I want to just go in and fix it. I want you to all really believe in your body, because I do. I always joke. I say, well, I'll sit over there in my optimistic corner. When you're ready, you can come and join me, but, I'll always cheer you on. But I want you to start to find things that your body does for you. I always say, like, when you get constipated, if I eat gluten, I get constipated, right? So, but I don't assume that I'm never going to poop again. I just, I don't go to that place. But fertility, you don't get pregnant, you're all of a sudden you're like, I'm never getting pregnant. It's just never going to work, and you have to understand that it's not a switch. It's not on off. It's a spectrum, and so you can do things to then, kind of coerce it into becoming more fertile or, less constipated, right? So to kind of start to think of things in that way. And I think it will help you support you on your path. But do you want to chime in on anything there?
So, I went years probably kind of ignoring the whole mind-body connection, the whole, believe in yourself, believe in your body. I totally ignored it because it was just not, I don't know. It's not that I didn't find it important, but I was always the one where I can fix this. I can fix it with nutrition. I can fix it with, all of this other stuff. And I didn't have to change about my body. And, I felt it was broken for so many years. I lived in that space where I just felt like my body was broken. And, it was my fault that I weren't able to have kids. And that's really a heavy load to bear. And it was something that I impressed upon myself because my husband didn't feel that way. Right. But I felt afraid that he did. And so I just I carried that load. And, it's almost, when I think about, the positive self-talk and the believing in that your body can do that. And the other aspect, the negative thoughts that go through your head really are so damaging to you. The positive thoughts can do such great things. But that negative self-talk that we have, my body's broken. My doctor says, there's nothing we can do to fix this. It's genetic. There's nothing I can do. There's, anything into play, and just, it's constant negative talk. When you're, not necessarily putting yourself down, but when you don't believe that your body is capable of healing. And so when I first kind of changed my diet, it wasn't necessarily my fertility that switched on. Yeah, it was, I stopped having migraines. My eczema started going away. I wasn't breaking out as much. So kind of like you said, it was finding those little things that were changing that made it easier for me to keep going. And then finally, 8 months later, I went from not ovulating more than once a year to ovulating every 4 weeks.
Wow.
So you can get there. Your body can get there. It can heal. You just kind of have to give it the space to do so and find those small little wins along the way to keep you positive and to keep, telling yourself positive thoughts that, okay, this is changing. This is good. I can keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's amazing too, how you healed yourself. I love that. It's so amazing. And then went on to have 3 kids. It's amazing. So yeah, and it's, who was it? I think Deepak Chopra, I heard him say once that, if people tell you need to be happy all the time, like you shouldn't surround yourself with that person because it's too much pressure, So like when we talk about this positive stuff, it's not like all of a sudden I just want you to be like, and Danielle the same, like, oh, life is, full of sunshine and roses and everything's great, and I'm going to get pregnant now. It's not that. It's more like, let's, I dare to say realistic, but let's take it one step at a time. I always say, even if you're feeling more joyful and grateful 55% of the time versus 45% of the time, that's a real good step in the right direction, and maybe we can aim for 70-30 because life happens and shit happens. And when you get your period, I always say you're allowed to be bummed out about it for sure, because you're putting a lot of effort into this. You're showing up, and I get really frustrated sometimes when some of my girls don't get pregnant, in the time span that I want them to. And I have to take a step back and trust, right? That goes back to this trust and patience. And then I sit there with their chart and go over like, well, look at this change and this change. And then I remind them, and then we get re-inspired again, but it's easy to fall off, and I think it's okay, and I think it's human, and I think it's natural, and I think, you know, at the core of this belief and the core of self-love is compassion, you know, for yourself, for others, for the situation. So be kind to yourself in all of this, and but find ways, you know, to celebrate the small wins, because, you know, it's like, even, you know, Danielle, I'm sure you could say the same thing. You know, my eczema is what I consider my red flag now, and it's like, or even if I get gas or bloated, because that never happens. You know, it's like if I eat something, I'm like, there must have been soy in that, and it wasn't labeled, because I know the immediate reaction. I mean, it's immediate. I get what I call a gluten hangover if I, you know, if I eat it, but it's just, that's how sensitive my body is. Not everybody is that sensitive. But when my eczema started to flare up, I was just like, okay, you know, I put myself on a series, like I was like, maybe I'm cheating a little more than, you know, but to me, it was like a sign that my body was screaming for some attention. It was like, you're not giving me everything it needs. And I was a little disappointed at the time, because I was like, okay, it's not working as well, you know, but then I got it back, and I feel so much better, because, you know, I'm encouraged again that, okay, I can catch it. Okay. So one is getting back in touch with nature. 2, detaching from electronics. 3, sleep. 4, belief in your body. 5, which, I mean, I think we've been hinting at the entire time, is I would call mindfulness. So meditation, I suppose, falls into that, if you wanted to say what habit would I practice to become more mindful. But I think it's way beyond that too, where there's just this presence, you know, that you are choosing to be present in your life. So all of these things will help you. Like nature would help you become more mindful. Having a better night's sleep would help you become more mindful. Obviously, detaching from electronics encourages mindfulness. Belief in your body really does, because you're starting to pay attention to, how is my body shifting? How is it changing? And, you know, you're becoming more mindful and appreciative of that. Of course, meditation, I think, is a tremendously helpful practice. I just heard Marianne Williamson talk, and she said, you know, 5 minutes a day. You know, Deepak says 20 minutes twice a day, and so, that just shuts me down sometimes, because I can't find 20 minutes twice a day most days, you know, and I love it if I could, but 5 minutes in the morning, I could do that. Like, you know, I can do it. And you all can too. You really can. Even if it's 3 minutes, you could do it. So just to sit and breathe and reconnect to your body. You know, in my first book, Chill and Get Healthy, I call it Chill Out and Check In Time. And I basically say, like, you could go to the bathroom at work and just sit on the stall for a couple extra minutes and just take some deep breaths and chill out and check in with your body. So, you know, to practice mindfulness in every angle. Another place where I think we forget about it is when we're eating. You know, to be mindful of what we're eating, how fast or how slow we're eating, how it tastes. I also love to go one step further and think about how much it's going to benefit, or maybe not, your health, you know, and especially when it comes to fertility, to, you know, see, like, I'm a big fan of eating fat. And so when you eat fat, I want you to see it go in and make your follicles nice and juicy and plump, and help thicken that lining. And, you know, even for sperm, like, you know, the reaction between egg and sperm is this enzymatic reaction that has to happen, but it's really important that cellularly they can actually connect and have this reaction. And fat is such an important part of every single cell in your body. And so, you know, to think about your foods and how it's benefiting you and your health, and sort of be mindful in that department as well. You want to chime in there?
You know, I think, you know, when you said mindfulness doesn't have to take, you know, a really long time, it's a really great advice, because I was put off by doing any sort of, you know, meditation, or anytime someone mentioned mindfulness, I'm like, just time, I only have time for what I'm doing.
Right.
But really, you know, once I started to look into it and trying to take, you know, just a few minutes, just to kind of quiet my mind and settle myself, and whether it was, you know, to focus on my breathing for just a couple of minutes, or to count, you know, it was something that someone had told me, just to, you know, try and be still and quiet and count up to 60.
Mm-hmm.
doing this. And it took me so many times to get past 10, where other thoughts didn't start popping in, things I needed to do, I needed to go, people I needed to talk to. And then I finally got up to like 15, and all of a sudden, oh, this is fantastic. I really got to blog about this. I should tell everybody about this. 15.
Wow.
It was something that I had to really practice, because, I'm someone who's constantly thinking of, things to do, new things to do with my business, new things to do with my website, places to go, people to see. And it was really helpful for me just to just be quiet, even for 1 minute, to count up to 60 and just to focus on the numbers, to focus on my breath. Really just kind of helps to settle myself.
Oh, yeah.
And then another thing when you about the food, to really pay attention to, your food as you eat it. I grew up in a Christian home, and we still, I hate to use the word Christian sometimes, just because there's so many negative connotations towards it. I'm like, but I am still, I'm still a believer. I have strong faith. But I grew up and we said this quick prayer before dinner, and it's like, thank you God for the food, yada yada yada, and we quick eat. And it really sudden a light bulb went off one time. And I'm like, we do this for a reason. We say a blessing over our food for a reason. This food nourishes our body. We're to be so thankful for this food that we're putting in our bodies. And a lot of times it doesn't even matter what food is. Say it's McDonald's, which I recommend ever. But when you're eating it thinking, oh, this is such junk food, this is horrible for me, it disrupts your digestion, and it disrupts that, a lot of that mind-body connection. So to even be thankful for the foods that we don't consider nourishing can do so much for, the digestion itself, and the way that your body reacts to that food, because the way you're thinking about the food is the way your body's going to react towards it. So, now I try and really, when we sit down to eat, to really kind of make that mental shift from busy day, we've got to get through this, to, what, let's take a moment. Let's really be thankful. Let's really just think about what we're doing here, and, how this is benefiting our bodies, and just taking, a couple minutes quietly before dinner to do that. And then to eat a little bit slower, to chew a little bit slower, to pay attention, really just changes the whole eating experience, which in turn will change the whole digestion experience and how you absorb your nutrients. And it all goes together.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I heard one of my teachers, I remember her saying something like, if you eat something and feel really bad about it, it's going to do harm, versus if you eat something bad and feel really good about it, it's going to do, a lot of good to you, if you will. So yeah, if you're, and we all have it. I had some coconut milk ice cream yesterday, and I kind of devoured half of a container, but I enjoyed every second of it. It was good, and so rather than feeling guilty about it, the guilt is the worst. And so we all can fall off a bit here and there. But to not, it probably goes back to the compassion and the mindfulness, and, being kind to yourself about all of it. But yeah, to really be appreciative of the food, no matter what it is, if it's good or bad. I wish we could get away from the good and the bad too, right? That's such bad terminology. But okay, so we've spent a good 50 minutes on our top 5 habits of highly fertile people. And so I just wanted to go in a little bit into what I think, I see clinically, and, Danielle, what you see too with your support groups of what we think couples, and I think obviously sharing these 5 habits is really important. That's my number one. I think all of them are going to be a little redundant, the habits for couples, but support, I think, is the number one when it comes to how you can help each other in this process. I know a lot of you emailed me that you were watching tonight with your partner, and I love that. That's so damn supportive, and I sincerely appreciate that. You know, I don't always get the partners into my clinic, but I do quite a few, you know, quite a bit, I should say. And I love when I get to treat the partners. I just think there's, you know, for me too, acupuncture is an energy medicine, so I feel like energetically I help align them, but also just the conversation, and I'm able to offer support and in ways, you know, it's different for male versus female. But you know, one of the things I really encourage is that, you know, when there's dietary changes, you guys do them together. When there's supplements, you guys do them together. You know, when you know, a workshop like this, you do it together. You find ways to support one another, and when one's down, you know, you encourage the you know, the other one. Like, you just take, just like anything. I think in a healthy relationship, there's open lines of communication. There's you see, you know, how you can best support each other, and you're honest, you communicate, and you know, you ask. I think it's great to just be like, what can I do in this situation? Because we all often feel helpless in these types of situations. You know, no one knows what to do or what to say, and they're, you know, you're both going through it, and you're both handling it in different ways. So to, you know, I think a great way to approach it is ask your partner, you know, what can I do to help you feel better? And you, as the person being asked, have to be honest and respond. You know, I would really, you know, be helpful if you did X, or just hold me, or just, you know, whatever it is, you know what you need, you know, this, but just to start to, you know, open up and really find ways to support one another on every level, from, you know, the nutritional changes to the mindfulness changes to just, you know, going in, you know, if you're having to go for testing, you know, if your partner wants you to come, then figure out how to go, you know, that type of thing. I think that stuff's really important, and to try to share the load a bit. Another really important. Do you want to chime in there? I'm sorry, sweetie. I was going on a tangent.
No, I mean, I think it gets difficult sometimes, especially for men,
Yeah.
because I think as women, we find that community that is a bit more supportive. I think men have a harder time finding community within the whole infertility world, because it's so, you know, it's so looked at as, well, you know, so many of the men feel like they're just not man enough when they find out, you know, that they might have, you know, medical reasons for the infertility. And I think sometimes it's really hard for the man to deal with. And so many women in my community, and that I've talked to, you know, over the last 7 or 8 years I've been running my site, you know, it's the women can find their community, they can find their help, they can find, you know, other people's experiences, whereas men seem to have a harder time crossing that bridge.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like they sit down with their buddies at work,
Yeah.
over, you know,
Talk about sperm, right?
you know, an analysis, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's very foreign to them. So I think sometimes it's harder for men to really kind of get into like the testing and the dietary changes and the supplements. And it's usually the women, you know, at least in a lot of the couples that I've spoken with, a lot of times it's the women who are really struggling to get, you know, their husbands on the same page.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, it's not so much, well, I don't know. I think it's really important to talk about why you're not on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, there's something deeper there. Sometimes it's not just, you know, them being stubborn about, you know, cutting out gluten or cutting out processed foods or something, that there's something underlying within your relationship that you're not wanting the same things. Because I think when you finally get on the same page, then those changes become easier to make together. It's easier to take those steps together and get done the testing and the dietary changes, or seeing different, you know, doctors or practitioners as a couple.
Yeah.
And like it's great when the couples, you know, are able to work together and do those things, because you know, you have that support right there with you. You know, that person who's walking this journey, you know, is right there with you to support you, and you can much easier, you know, support him. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, but you have to find those reasons why you're not on the same page.
I think that's brilliantly, you brilliantly stated that. You know, it's so perfect and so true. Yeah, and that's your work to do as a couple. And, you know, that it ties into one of the other points I wanted to make, not necessarily a habit for the couples, but that what I always say is babies are made out of love. And, you know, and I mean that too, even if you wind up doing IVF for having that child, I'm not just talking about like sex equaling love. You know, I'm talking about intimacy, right? And that you are on the same page, and this, you have this shared vision, and you're going to do whatever it takes to support one another to get there, and to remember that. And sometimes, yeah, it does, it requires deep, you know, deep dark honesty, and not always comfortable, not always easy, but um you know, it's, if you want the best relationship, I think, or the most out of your relationship, and you want to continue to grow and expand as people and as lovers, as, you know, intimately connected individuals, then should share and figure out, like Danielle said, why you're not on the same page. I think that's so beautifully stated. I might steal that from you. Um, start saying that in the clinic. But another thing that whenever I do have the men in the clinic, one of the things that they talk to me most about is that they no longer have sex outside of ovulation, or they feel a lot of pressure during sex, even if they're wind up doing assisted reproductive techniques. But so one thing that I've begun saying over the last couple of years is that as a couple, you need to have sex every week, at least once, ideally 2 to 3 times a week, every week, not just when you're ovulating. So break that habit. It's going to be uncomfortable at first and awkward, but you're going to schedule sex and you're going to figure out a time to make it work. I mean, obviously life gets busy, so more than once a week sometimes seems outrageous, and that's fine. But I want you to start having sex outside of times when you could potentially get pregnant, because it just can really shift the dynamic in the relationship. Men really start to feel like sperm donors and not like providers and husbands and fathers, you know, potential fathers. So, you know, that's, I just tend to think that it falls on the woman to, you know, and it falls, well, you're both here, so the couples, but if there's women here and their husbands or partners aren't on, I think it falls on us in that sense of, we need to take it out of it becoming a job and back to when it, you know, I can't guarantee that it'll go back right away to what it was before you were even thinking about having kids, but to just start to try to get into the habit again of that intimacy on a regular basis outside of the fact of trying to get pregnant. Really, really important. And I'll add in one thing, I'll let Danielle talk, but another thing that I've always had the men do is start initiating like date nights. If you don't already have that initiated in your life, which is something I do recommend that you schedule it, even if it's a once a month or fine, but to get back in the habit of actually scheduling a date night and making it happen, because from there you will actually remember, outside of getting pregnant, why you like your partner, or maybe why you don't, and then that would be another situation too. Hopefully, though, you remember why you like them, and then you want to have sex with them outside of just trying to get pregnant, you know. So to get back in touch with that, and that's part of that reconnecting, you know. So we're reconnecting to ourselves, but we're reconnecting to our partners and to our relationships outside of this trying to conceive world, which sometimes I'm sure it feels like you're never going to get out of it, but you will, you know. I have faith that you will. And so do you want to add something in there, sweetie?
Yeah, well, I just think, you know, what you said is, you know, having date nights and reconnecting is so important, to find that friend that you have,
Yeah.
because infertility can be so stressful, and it's all charts and thermometers and timing, and you know, it just becomes, more of a medical procedure. Even if you're not, going the assisted reproductive, technology route, it still feels very, very timed, very,
forced.
it becomes,
and
you're very forced, and you really need to find time and ways to connect and still, have fun and joke around and talk about things other than, having a baby and, what you're doing to try and have a baby. You really need to, connect in other ways. Find that fun again. And it boosts the relationship and closeness and intimacy, and all around it's just a lot more fun to be with that person at home.
And there was this interesting article in the New York Times. It was probably 4, 5, 6 months ago now, but that it was preliminary research, a small study, but that couples who had more regular sex were more fertile. And it had something to do with the immune system, that the regularity of sex was basically making the female body less hostile to sperm or embryos, which in the world of fertility and the real unexplained infertility, which I dislike that word, but it's all basically this sense of some kind of autoimmune issue going on, that the body isn't allowing the sperm or the embryo. It's rejecting it, So it was interesting science that the more sex you have, actually you become more fertile. And I would think too, from a hormonal perspective, it balances you. I think from, if, outside of science, it's something we can't measure, but from the energetic perspective, it really connects you again. And that's what really just starts to, you lose that. So, okay, we're going to bust into some of the other things I promised we would talk about. So we might go a little fast because we usually wrap this up around 9:15. Exercise. So my general recommendations are to not start a brand new exercise regime when you're trying to get pregnant. Continue what you have been doing. If you are not getting pregnant and you exercise a lot, I would cut back. If you are not getting pregnant and you don't exercise at all, I would do some. So I know that's very general, but obviously I don't know all the viewers. What I see in New York a lot of is the over-exercisers, and they tend to be too thin and not even too thin. I shouldn't even it's not really about weight. It's really just about, are you depleting yourself? I see a lot of women who, they really max out their adrenal system. And so it just comes down to a very basic premise of like what they call fight or flight. Like if your body is in a seriously stressful situation, which over-exercise can produce that seriously stressful situation, the last thing the body will do is get pregnant, because it does not have enough reserves. So it just says, sorry, I can't do that, And one way you can tell is if you have a super light period. That's usually an indicator to me. If you don't see cervical mucus, you tend to be very dry everywhere. Pretty clear-cut sign. And then on the other side, there could be under-exercisers where we need some movement to get, chi and blood flowing and get things circulating. So very generally, I love the idea of like 3 to 4 days a week, 30 to 45 minutes of moderate exercise. I think that's the perfect recipe for fertility. No more than 12 miles a week of running. I do not like hot yoga or any gym that turns up their temperatures to like 80 or 90 degrees. Way too hot. It burns up all your fluids, and in Chinese medicine, fluids, all of like blood and cervical mucus, all of the same root. And so if we're deficient in fluids, then you're just dry on the inside and your follicles don't get bathed in the right amount of blood. And so they won't mature the right way. And there's not enough mucus and, uterine lining, all of these things. So I would say no hot anything. Don't all of a sudden start like CrossFit the same week you decide you want to start trying to get pregnant. If you've been doing CrossFit and it works for you, fine. I usually say pull back once you find out you are pregnant until we get through that first trimester. But those are my general exercise recs. And how about you, Danielle?
I'd say probably the same thing. If you're a couch potato, maybe get up off the couch a little bit and, do some walking. Walking can be great, and just the muscle movement can help move lymph flow. So it's really great for, detoxification.
Right. Love
things
it.
moving. And, you really don't want your body to be stagnant. You want things to move around. You want to move that blood around and get fresh blood to all areas of the body. So definitely move some. But yeah, if you're not getting pregnant and you're training for marathons constantly, maybe we should stick to, some 5Ks, 10Ks.
Yeah, great advice.
I've had a lot of women that have told me that, they used to run, 5-6 miles a day, and they had to cut it down to a day. Otherwise, they just simply couldn't get pregnant, no matter how healthy they ate and how, they did everything else perfectly. They just couldn't until they cut back. It was just too much for their specific body. So, and I think that goes along the line of, the mindfulness is just to pay attention, to your own body, and what it needs. And if something's not working, you're going to have to change it, no matter what you think your ideals are, or what your head is telling you. If your body's not working with you, it's time for a change.
Agreed, 100%. I think that's perfectly stated. There's a question, what about weightlifting while trying to conceive? I think it falls into the same thing. Like, if you normally lift weights, I think that's fine. I wouldn't want you all of a sudden doing super heavy weights. I think moderate weightlifting would be perfectly fine. I think that's great to keep muscles toned. And in fact, I met with a trainer like a few times while I was pregnant, just to stay on top of my body. And she had me using weights and squats and, all sorts of stuff, but moderate. So that's the idea, moderate, nothing too heavy. And I would add, which I'm sure you would as well, Danielle, if you are a serious weightlifter and you're not getting pregnant, then yes, you need to pull back for sure. So it's the same kind of thing, as like the sleep, what I was saying. If you're trying to conceive and you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, then 100% that needs to change immediately. So, tune into your body and make the changes. Okay. And so then I wanted to go into, what we were talking about, what I said in the promo about fertility cleanses. What's the best fertility cleanse? And that's kind of a trick statement on my end, I think, because I don't really believe in cleanses, as far as like juice cleanses and things like that. Not that they're terrible, but I really believe life should be a cleanse. You should just live in a way that actually supports the detoxification process in your body and supports your liver. So that's, that's clean eating and non-toxic bath and beauty products. That's even emotional cleanses. And, if you are doing too many cleanses, like juice cleanses, or too much raw types of foods, or you are what is my one professor calls it something, it's like limitarian or something like that, where you're constantly limiting or cutting foods out, or I don't eat that, I don't eat that, I don't eat that, that you should become more of a flexitarian, where you're more open-minded about food, and perhaps that's what's going on with your body. One thing I would say from a cleansing perspective that I think is important to do once in a while is take a cleanse from like the ovulation predictor kits, take a cleanse from BBT charting. That stuff can make you crazy, and I've just seen that. I used to recommend BBT all the time in my clinic, and I don't anymore, only if a girl wants to do it. And then if she's not getting pregnant, like if it's 3 months in and I say, take a break, no temperatures this month, because it's an everyday focus. It creates some madness. So I think take a cleanse from things like that, take a cleanse from the online forum sometimes, cleanse from your doctors. Those types of cleanses I think are the best for your fertility. But I know Donielle has an ebook, right? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So, I think it's really important to recognize that our body cleanses itself. We have these detoxification systems in place. When we think about, detoxing or cleanses, so many people think, well, I have to get all the bad stuff out. So what can I take just to mass exodus every clean slate? And I think we really need to back up and say, wait a second, our body detoxifies every day. When we go to the bathroom, when we sweat, when, it's just everything, or our body naturally tries to get rid of things. So let's look at, instead of forcing it to get rid of things that it's not ready for yet, let's work within our bodies to just boost the natural systems that are already in place. So the liver is really great at detoxifying, and it helps to break down hormones and eliminate them from the body once they've been used. So let's maybe take some herbs or eat some foods that are naturally great for the liver and help support that system. Let's exercise a little bit more. Let's get our bodies sweating and moving. Release, something that could be stagnant in the body. Things like that just naturally boost our systems. I really don't, I wrote a book on it, but I really don't love the idea of doing this major cleanse, especially before conception, because before conception, you're supposed to be nourishing your body and, building up nutrient stores. So it's really important that if you are going to do, some type of dietary elimination, that you do it, 6 months prior to when you want to conceive, because you need at least, 3 to 4 months, preferably 5, to really start stores and to eat to help, balance hormones. There's a couple little things in my book that, I recommend, like, I'm a big fan of animal products and meats and butter, milk. I love them. But sometimes they can take longer for the body to digest. So instead of cutting them out completely, just eat them earlier in the day, so that while you're sleeping, instead of your body working on digestion, your body can work on restoration and detoxification. So just eat all of your animal products before like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then by the time you go to bed, they will be digested and your body can focus on other things. So a lot of times it's just changing the way that we do things a little bit, and not necessarily completely eliminating those nourishing foods. Just changing how we eat them can be really helpful and effective.
I love it. That's great advice. I think that's really good advice. And sometimes too, like I'll take a break from dairy and just, lighten the load a little bit. Like I did that recently with the eczema flare up, because I thought maybe I'm having too much dairy and my body isn't liking it right now for some reason. And I don't think it was the case, but yeah, I think things like that you can play around with, but these cleanses, and to realize that our body is really good at that all on its own. So just find ways to support it. I love that. So the fertility massage conversation, I did upload a photo on the, what is this called? The event page. You guys can hopefully see it. I will email it all to you tomorrow too. And I might just do that instead of getting into too much detail, but I think these are all acupuncture points that are very good for fertility, and they're all basically from the belly button to the pubic bone. So they're in this area where the uterus is and the ovaries are. And, this idea, like I just had a girl who's, she's doing IVF and she's going through a cycle, and her lining is not getting thick enough. And it's happened before, but, she's gotten pregnant and carried to term. So I'm not super concerned about it. But one of the things I recommended to her was to do some, abdominal massage, basically. And just generally, we can focus on these acupressure points that I pulled up in this image, which I really love. And as a side note, I'm going to do a Facebook Live event on Tuesday with Refinery 29 with their wellness group on Facebook, and we're going to talk about acupuncture and balancing hormones. So you guys should tune in, but I'm going to use this photo too. I was finding it for that, and I was like, oh, I can use it tonight. This is perfect. But so you can massage these points all individually, and then, but I even think just generally getting some massage oil, preferably without any crap in it, or just use olive oil is a really good massage oil. I say 2 ounces of olive oil and do about 4 drops of essential oil of ginger and or cinnamon. Both very warming herbs, and it's wonderful to have a warm uterus. Warm uteruses are very fertile in Chinese medicine. We're all about warmth. So we do the 2 ounces of olive oil with 4 drops of ginger essential oil, 4 drops of cinnamon essential oil, no more than that, because they're pretty strong essential oils, and literally massage your lower abdomen in a clockwise motion as if you are the clock. And I think that's also a nice time to do some visualization or even send some love to that uterus and ovaries. But it really does make a difference. I often recommend a Mayan abdominal massage to some of my clients. It really seems to help with ovulation and even just getting healthy blood flow to the uterus and the ovaries. And so, but you could do this at home yourself. The important thing to remember is you should only really do it between like when your period ends and up until ovulation. And then once you could potentially be pregnant, no more of the massage. You could do a hot water bottle if you wanted to just keep the uterus warm. But so, do you have anything to add? Or I know I was brought up with you earlier, you had that blog on vaginal steam. I thought that might be fun to just talk about that, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah. So, just one point on the fertility massage. I found a practitioner a few years ago that does it, and I think she's my favorite person ever now. If someone can actually find someone who is
so amazing, I agree.
Yeah, if you can find someone that is trained in fertility massage, it's really amazing, and it's a great way to kind of break up that whole area and bring fresh blood, and they're able to kind of move things around a little bit. I actually went yesterday and had some work done, and she noticed, well, your ovaries kind of tucked back in here a little bit. Let's get it on there. So, they kind of loosen things up so that things are sitting in the right positions, which can help, with the nerves. When you think of like chiropractic care, they work with, the nerves to everything to make sure things are, firing the way that they should. So fertility massage for me is one of my absolute favorite alternative therapies. And I think everyone should find therapists. And a lot of the therapists I've talked to, they're the ones that end up recommending, things like the vaginal steam, which I have to say, I posted it on my Facebook, and my husband was at work at his lunch table, and he's a semi-trailer mechanic, and someone saw it and they're like, wait, hold on, what is this?
Oh,
I did this for my husband. He's like, what are you posting?
That is great.
Yeah, that was kind of highly unusual for a whole bunch of, mechanics to be sitting there looking at an article about vaginal steams and not knowing what was going on. But some women find them really, really helpful. And, I think it's really important to work with a practitioner or an herbalist who knows your health history, who knows, some of the health things that you're dealing with, to really help you figure out which herbs to use. Because there are so many different herbs for fertility, for nourishing, that it's really helpful if they can take both your emotional and your physical needs into consideration and find a blend that really works for you. But there have been, I've heard many stories from women who have done this, who, either had scant periods or sometimes on the other end, like a lot of clotting, and they've done vaginal steams throughout their cycle. And of course, only do them after ovulation if you're not trying to get pregnant. You do not want to do them after ovulation if you are currently trying to conceive, or if you could possibly be pregnant. But sometimes even after one cycle, they've noticed, different changes. also, you know, when you get past the physical benefits of it, there are, you know, I don't know if we necessarily call them emotional benefits, but just the idea that you're doing something to benefit your reproductive organs, and you're taking time, and you're taking 15 to 20 minutes, and you're just basically sitting there waiting. You know, you can take the time and really focus on you know, what's going on, and how that area feels, and how it's changing, you know, throughout your cycle. And the longer, you know, you do either fertility massage or the steams, changing, you know, you're a little bit more hands-on at that point, and you're noticing what's going on. So I think that's really important, just to kind of to tune into that part of our bodies, because I think in our culture so much we try and separate ourselves from it. And really, it's such a feminine thing to really pay attention to your cycle and to your body, and to be able to feel and know where your ovaries are and where your fallopian tubes are. And you know, you can feel so much when you do your own fertility massage. But yeah, it's really that connection, to be our whole selves, you know, the whole feminine self, and to not have that separation between us and then, oh, I have to deal with, you know, my period, because the cycle is so much more than just the period. It's so helpful to pay attention throughout your entire cycle, you know, what's going on with the body.
Yeah, I agree. Love that. Okay, I think on the conservation of time, because it's getting late, I'm going to wrap us up. And what I'm going to do is tomorrow in the follow-up email, I will send out I'll include your blog on the vaginal steam, if that's okay with you. And then the methodology on how to do the fertility massage. And then I do have like 3 different fertility tea recipes. So I'll include that in the email, and that way you guys can make some of your own fertility enhancing teas. And so I think that's everything. And I hope that's okay, but we talked so much that I think we should wrap up here. Viewers are starting to drop off too. I think everybody's like, okay, I'm tired. I'll watch the rest tomorrow. So I think we deserve to hang up as well. But I just want to say thank you. I love you guys. I hope this was beneficial, and feel free to email me. I'm open to any suggestions on any topics you ever want me to talk about on these webinars. And tomorrow I'll follow up with my information contact-wise, Danielle's, and like I said, her blog on the vaginal steam that the mechanics really liked. That's hysterical. And the fertility massage information and the fertility teas, so you guys can get to that. And I'll let Danielle say goodbye, and then we'll wrap up. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Of course.
I tend talk fertility a lot. It's funny. I talk more about the unmentionables than most people do in their lifetime. So this was great. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming, for showing up. And I hope you learned a ton.
Yay. All right. Thank you guys so much. Okay. Have a good night. Until next time. I think the next one will be at the end of this month, so I'll send out information on that. Okay. Thank you. Good night.